Hello to all of our listeners out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 16 of the Canadian Patriot Podcast, recorded on February 22nd, 2016. Joining me this evening, we have Gavin, a business owner, gun enthusiast, hunter, atheist, and host of the Greater Toronto Area chapter of the Tactical Beard Owners Club. And for this episode, would like to be referred to as the Dude. You know that, or his dudeness, or Duder, or El Dunerino, if you're not into the whole brevity thing. I'm your host, Andrew. I'm a libertarian, competitive shooter, gear reviewer at everydaytactical.com, and gun club director. We'd like to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit canadianpatriotpodcast.com/feedback, or you can email us at feedback@canadianpatriotpodcast.com. Gavin, as always, welcome to the show. It's Monday night. Let's do this.
Indeed. Let's. And I'm glad you read the updated show notes. I had to sneak that one in there for you.
No, I like that. That threw me off, but I think I kind of got it.
Yeah.
So, I guess we should go right into what are we drinking, because that's relevant.
Yeah. Well, I guess I made the challenge to anyone that gives us a 5-star review that they could choose what I'm drinking. And whoever it was, bastard that they are, chose milk. So I decided to spice things up a little, and I am drinking White Russians. So it's
technically milk. I like it.
I've even got my sweet Russian hat kicking around just in case.
Nice. I'm a little disappointed there is no like gnarly cardigan or like weird bathrobe.
I couldn't find, like, I have a really, really ugly cardigan that my parents bought me in Machu Picchu. It's got like alpacas on it and it's hideous, but it's buried in a closet at my parents' place because I never wear it because it's that hideous. And I couldn't find my bathrobe. So
that's unfortunate. Hopefully you have a rug that ties the room together.
I do, actually. I have the rug from The Shining.
Perfect. That's ideal. I like that. I have more homebrew again this week. We have the ale of questionable potency. It's more of the homebrew red stuff.
I guess you only really need to figure out exactly what it is if you're trying to sell it, government
That's
getting
right.
involved and all that.
And you only, so because it's been less than 5 minutes, let's go off on a weird tangent.
Done.
If you decide to sell beer in Canada, you need to get an excise license from the federal government, and you have to submit the alcohol percentage of your beer when you get the excise license, and then they never ask you again. So you could make totally different beer in like a year, and like it's whatever. It's a whole different style. It's different alcohol. It's different everything. But they only care about it the first time you do it, and they actually want some of the beer so they can make sure that your equipment that you take the alcohol reading with is accurate enough.
Well, there you go. That sounds like the government.
Yeah. So let's check once and make sure, and then just leave them to their own devices, which is like the one time the government wants to leave anybody alone, I guess.
Yeah, well, after they bother you.
Well, right, because they've already got their tax. Like, you've already paid your dues.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why don't they just charge you a beer brewing tax and don't even bother asking you? Like, wouldn't that make more sense? All right.
I don't know. It's
right.
For socialism or something.
Well,
The points are made up and the rules don't matter.
Yeah.
For everyone's listening pleasure, we're available on Stitcher and iTunes. We would like iTunes feedback. If you leave a 5-star review, you too can decide what Gavin drinks within reason. And we need to stipulate things like this because Gavin is not Bear Grylls, despite what you post on Facebook.
It's true. Although I could probably take him in a street fight.
My mother could take him in a street fight. Like,
it's true.
Moving on. You're bringing us a petition this week, right?
Yeah, I actually just found out about it a couple of hours ago when I was pushing all the other petitions that we're always pushing everybody. And petition 179, which is the latest one. And what they're calling for is basically to have a independent tribunal come in and take a look at the nonsense that the RCMP did in High River, which is when the flood happened and they kicked in a bunch of doors and took everybody's guns and all kinds of nonsense. I guess they want to rebuild the trust in the RCMP, so they want someone not part of the RCMP or backing them in any way to take a look at their ridiculous actions and, find them unjustified, I guess.
Good, they should be. Okay, let's put a link to that in the show notes. Do you know where it stands? It must be new. It's got a new number.
Brand new. I mean, I think there was maybe a few hundred when I signed it.
Okay, let's get on that, folks. Let's hold the RCMP accountable. They need to be accountable to somebody, and it ought to be the people paying the salaries, the taxpayers. Oh, that was such a disaster. I really hope that they get taken to task for that. 'Cause going into people's houses and securing firearms in a town where nobody is all kinds of absurdity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I could see if they happen to be in the home already for some other legitimate reason and they just see a shotgun laying out on a table, that they would temporarily take it until the owner comes and claims it. That I'm okay with. But yeah, just going in with their registry like a shopping list and rifling through people's homes to find their stuff when it wasn't causing a problem, not cool at all. That is not okay.
Yeah. Things like that make me sad to be a Canadian.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be better than that. The guys in the red surge coats are supposed to set the example. Get your crap together. Please get your crap together. Let's get everybody to sign that. We'll have a link in the show notes. We'll probably spam it on the Facebooks. We're not going to talk any other petitions this week because everybody already knows what petitions they need to sign. If they don't, check your local show notes listing.
If you haven't signed them, just go and do it now.
Yeah, go and sign the petitions that we harp on every week. Well, not all of them. Let's not get carried away.
All right, just the good ones.
Read the petitions for yourself. As a citizen of our fine country, you have an opportunity to interface directly with the legislature and tell them how you feel. And the government has to do so. It doesn't have to do much, but it has to read the petitions that it's given. So we should at least use that method that we have to force the government to acknowledge our desires. We can't make them do anything, but we can at least make them read it and think about it. Well, we can at least make them read it.
Yep.
All right, topic time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, topic time. No show this week, no news this week, because this show is basically news, except we're not the media, but somebody's the media. We're just not sure who. So for those folks that are not following what's been going on the interwebs with Facebook and Twitter, there is an alternative, we'll call it a right-wing news organization called the Rebel.media. So they're at the Rebel.media. They're run by Ezra Levant. Brian Lilly, I think, is the co-founder. Both Levant and Lilly are former hosts from Sun News when Sun had a television station, not just the newspapers, which, oddly enough, couldn't get government funding and then went bankrupt. So I wonder what would happen if we, I don't know, took away the money from the CBC, but that's a whole different tangent.
I think they need to start getting better programming on the CBC. So let's give them all the money that we can, because otherwise no one is going to watch it.
Well, it doesn't. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about the whole people not watching it thing in a minute. So they've got the Rebel.media. They're particularly critical of the NDP government in Alberta, right? And we'll throw all the biases out, because I'm not a reporter, but at least people that listen to the show know where I stand on everything, and there is no political BS, and we call stuff like we see it, right? Or at least I call the stuff the way I see it.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, for the most part, I think you and I agree on topics, but that's because we have the same political leanings, more or less. But I'm sure we'll get to something where we don't agree. But yeah, that's your opinion. That's my opinion, and I don't think either of us, pull any punches or hide that.
Yeah, so we're pretty straightforward, and we're not journalists. We do the show. Listen to the disclaimer at the end of the podcast. This is for entertainment, but we cite our sources. We provide a balanced perspective. I mean, it's our perspective, but we are sane, rational Canadians, and we tell people when we feel a certain way about something because of our whatever particular bias it is, which is different than when we read the news article versus when we discuss the news article. And I think anybody that listens to a couple episodes knows how that works, right? So the Rebel is fairly right-wing. conservative, right? Like they're pro-conservative party, they're pro-smaller government, they're pro-lesser taxes, they're pro-military. They spend a lot of time bashing the socialists and the communists in this country, which is good because the other news outlets are predominantly very left-leaning. Call them liberal because that fits with some party lines that they fall within. So we have groups like the CBC who gets funded by the federal government and never has anything bad to say about the Liberal Party because the Liberal Party keeps offering them more money every year. So they don't really mention that part, but then they run like a pro-liberal government story, and they're like, look at Justin Trudeau's hair. He's so magical. We just want to ride him and maybe bridle him and be like bronies.
Well, he's a magical unicorn after all.
Oh, he's something, all right. Again, we're biased. I don't like Justin Trudeau. I don't think he's an especially good leader of our country because he says things like it's 2015 when he answers questions, which is not how you lead a democratic nation in 2015, in my opinion. So we have all of these other news outlets, and we have other things that masquerade as news outlets, like BuzzFeed, that we'll get into later. Remind me about BuzzFeed, because we'll come back to that. It's important. We also have things like Vice, which we've cited on our show as being like current news commentary stuff. And I don't know when Vice went from being like funny cat pictures on the internet to being like a legitimate source of the news, but apparently it did.
Yeah.
Same thing with Huffington Post. I don't know when Huffington Post became like legitimate news, but someday I finally noticed that like this is actually what's going on. They have reporters that are in their own special way reporting current events, and I don't understand, because shouldn't they be talking about like celebrity gossip?
Hey, in some places that is the news, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Okay, so back in January of this year, the new NDP Alberta government, or the current NDP Alberta government, they've only been in power there for less than a year, right? It's not 6 months yet. They had their royalty review. So the royalty review is where the sitting government in the province has a closed-door briefing with the media. I'm using air quotes for our audio listeners, the media. The government explains basically what their plan is as the new governing party of the province. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to do it? There's some stuff about their budget, how they're going to like raise capital, how they're going to spend capital. And the journalists have an opportunity to ask questions from the government about how they plan to achieve their goals. So it sounds pretty straightforward, right? Like the media, air quotes, the media shows up and they get to quiz the government about like what's going on. And it's closed door, so it's not open to like the public per se. But you get on the list, you're the media, you go in, you ask questions, and they like tell you what the plan is. So Sheila Gunn-Reid, who is the Alberta bureau chief for the Rebel.media, shows up to a press event because she's a reporter and gets told to, pound sand, hit the roads, Jack. Like, they're not having any of her there because Rachel Notley, the Alberta premier, feels that she is not legitimate media. And this is immediately where we start getting into problems. Because the premier of our province getting to decide who is or is not media is basically the topic for the show. And it doesn't matter if it's right-leaning news or left-leaning news. The fact that the head of the government gets to decide who is able to report the news is a massive problem.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, the people that should be reporting the news should be the people that are critical of whoever's in power, because that gives sort of the check and balance. I mean,
well, yes and no. I mean, so we'll get into like how journalism works in our country.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, part of it is fair and balanced reporting, right?
Yeah.
So if we lived in a society where journalism was actually reported with actual journalistic integrity, it would be presented from an unbiased perspective. Now, obviously, we're people, and we can't actually present anything from an unbiased perspective because everyone has some kind of an underlying bias. But as a journalist, they should be putting that aside and reporting the facts. If they want to report their opinion, that's cool, but that's not the news. The facts are the news, and their opinion is their opinion. So they can present how they feel about something, or like their interpretation of something, or based on their upbringing or moral beliefs or system of values, how that fact impacts their life or the life of other Canadians like or different from them, right? But that shouldn't change how the facts get reported. The problem is it does, right? So we have people that are like, Justin Trudeau's hair is amazing. Okay, that has nothing to do with how he behaves as leader or what his platform is. Like, stop telling us about that and tell us things that are important.
Yeah, and that isn't even like a fact. I mean, that's just someone's opinion, right? Like,
I know, but that's
I
what
don't think his hair is that good. I mean,
I'm trying to draw my opinion because that's what they're reporting being the news, and it's like this is really like this is like celebrity gossip where it's not really a celebrity.
Well,
no.
So, he was a drama teacher, so
if you want to talk about celebrities, ask Trudeau's mom. I need a sound effect for that.
Yeah, a little rim shot. Just
yeah, I was working on that. I was hoping I could work that into the show. Remind me to edit this.
Fix it in post,
yeah. So Sheila Gunn-Reid gets kicked out, and we've got a whole bunch of articles. If anybody wants to see the whole backstory, you can see stuff on the Edmonton Sun by Lauren Gunter. You can see 2 articles from the Huffington Post, Global News, the Globe and Mail, or the Calgary Herald. So you could probably make the argument that Sun News is the rightest out of all of those left-leaning call them magazines. I mean newspapers. They should be magazines. And then we have our friends, the Huffington Post, there that I still don't understand how they're the news. But even the Globe and Mail gets critical of the Alberta government running an article called Why the Premier of Alberta Shouldn't Get to Decide Who's the Media. Like, even the people that support the Alberta government have realized that maybe these folks shouldn't be allowed to decide who is or is not the media.
Yeah.
So they go back and forth, and this has gone on over a week, 10 days, and there's a bunch of letters back and forth from lawyers because, you know, we can't settle things like adults. Levant and whoever Notley's press secretary is, because I doubt it's Notley herself, she's far too busy doing whatever it is Her Royal Highness does. So they have a lawyer get involved in Edmonton named Fred Kozak, and he asks for the Justice Department lawyer, Jason Thong, to, like, unban the Rebel Media reporters, because his assertion is that these are the media. These are legitimate reporters reporting on the news. They have a charter right to be there to do this. And the Justice Department sends back like a one-line response that says, our client's position remains that your client and those who identify as being connected to your client are not journalists and are not entitled to access to media lockups or other such events. Holy blanket statement, Batman. Like, so anyone that works with or has worked with or is associated with the Rebel.media is not a journalist?
So in theory, then, they could ban anyone that's ever been at a media event with them.
Where does the Alberta government get off deciding that a news outlet is a news outlet? Like, that's not like how parliamentary press galleries work in our country, first off. Second off, that shouldn't be up to the discretion of the sitting government. Like, and it's a charter right violation. And as socialists, the NDP really should be pushing their love of the charter, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I could see, like, if you and I showed up going, we're media, they would tell us to take a hike.
Hit the bricks. We're done. But we're not media. We don't run a news site. We run an entertainment podcast that talks about current events.
Yeah, you know, I mean, if you use media as a broad term, I mean, we are media because we are presenting something, yes, with extreme bias in some cases and not, you know, necessarily digging out stories ourselves. We're presenting stuff that other people have done all the legwork on. But I mean, we are part of in a small way, the greater media, if you will. But I certainly wouldn't claim to be media like a big shot or anything. But if we did, I could see them telling us to take a hike. But if you worked for an actual newspaper or news website or even a magazine that does report some sort of factual stuff and not just gossip, I would say you are part of the media. And if you work for an outlet that they're allowing into the event, that's even further proof that you are part of the media and should be there. Like,
so that's the thing that I want to figure out is where is that distinction between who is and who is not the media? Because having a website doesn't make you a media, a member of the media. It doesn't make you a journalist. Having a blog doesn't necessarily mean you're not, doesn't necessarily mean you are. A radio show, a TV show, like none of these things necessarily mean you are or you are not a member of the media, or particularly that you're a journalist. And really, the only people that I want in a press gallery should be legitimate journalists.
Yep. Well, I think, this is part of the great thing and the bad thing about, social media and the internet and all this advancement in technology. Before, you used to work for a paper, you had a press pass, right? Like, there were no independent journalists or anything like that. Like, everything was accredited and you had credentials that you could show and prove, and it was easy, right? But in this day and age, anyone can be a journalist. Not everyone is, but anyone could be.
Right. And that's where I don't like the idea of the government getting to decide who meets that criteria or not. Because at some point, you're not a journalist, and then at some point, you are. So if you're, say, Edward Osborne that was on the show last week, TV Press Pass, at some point he decided he was going to have a website and he was going to talk about what was going on in guns in Canada. And nobody read his work, right? Because one day he decided to flip the switch on the internet that made a website. Did that make him a journalist? Did anybody read his work? Not right away, right? But at some point he has become considered like legitimate media, right?
Yeah.
So he runs a small fact-based news site talking about how guns work in Canada, like what we're getting imported or not, and what the RCMP is doing. And we talked about how he had the inside scoop on the new Type 81s that were coming into the country from China. So I would consider someone like that to be a legitimate journalist because he's finding stories, he's presenting facts, he's doing it with a very limited and obvious bias.
Yeah, I think it's maybe not so simple, which is what makes it kind of a pain in the ass, because it's kind of relative to maybe the situation. If the NDP wants to hold an NDP party that they're doing, whatever, as just the NDP party and invite whatever journalists they want to report on it because it's their private party, sure. But if they're doing it as the government in charge, then I think that's a whole other story, right?
Right. So let's look at some of that stuff, because believe it or not, we actually have freedom of speech and freedom of the press in our country. And we did before 1982, but in 1982, it got enshrined under Trudeau Sr.'s charter. So 2B of the charter says that we have the right to freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. So the way I look at it is everyone has a Charter 2 right to be able to communicate over any form that they choose. And there's nowhere in there that says, and the government gets to decide what that is.
Yeah. I think there should be maybe, another body that gets to decide, or people that are considered legitimate media that haven't been to an event before maybe get to decide. But then you've got, your competition deciding whether you're media or not, which could be a whole other can of worms.
So let's look at how the Fed does it, because our federal government has a separation between the government and the Canadian Press Gallery. So the Canadian Press Gallery is in Ottawa on Parliament Hill, and the Canadian Press Gallery is an association of journalists that are accredited media through the press gallery to cover federal government events in Ottawa. So the way that it works is they must, if they're going to be a member of the press gallery, they must prove that their principal occupation is reporting, interpreting, or editing parliamentary or federal government news, and they work for an organization that reports on a regular basis on that news. Some notable personalities include Carl Nuremberg. I think his name is Nuremberg. He's like the lead writer for Rabble.ca, an incredibly left-wing. I'm going to have the courtesy of calling it a website. It's Carl's blog, but it appeals to a fairly large demographic in our country, and people treat Rabble.ca as a legitimate news source.
Yeah.
But if you read it, it is also obviously incredibly biased and left-leaning. That's not a criticism. It's just it's the material that he's presenting, right? Like that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It provides for diversity in reporting. But if you look at it, he is very, anything the NDP or the Liberal Party does is the best thing ever. And Stephen Harper was the boogeyman for like 4 years, right? So other provinces also have press galleries, but the province can decide how these press galleries are run. Apparently in Alberta, the premier gets to decide who's in. In Ottawa, the press gallery is an independent body, and the only person in the government that actually has any like real authority in how the press gallery operates is the Speaker of the House, and that's only to keep the press gallery in line so that people aren't like heckling the politicians.
So you can throw someone out if they're being a jerk.
Yeah, and that's really the only thing that the Speaker of the House does is like, nah, that guy's a D-bag. He does not get to hang around anymore. He needs to take his ball and go home.
Yeah.
But we also have people like Brian Lilly. Brian Lilly of the Rebel.media is an accredited member of the Federal Press Gallery. As are two people that work for BuzzFeed. See, BuzzFeed is back. I told everybody it would be back. How is BuzzFeed considered like legitimate news?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I wouldn't consider, I'd call it maybe entertainment news, like, so, I guess some of what they do is sort of, I mean, haven't they sort of found a few stories, like,
I think that they're going to be a lot like Vice or the Huffington Post, that they are going to become a legitimate news source, and they're going to serve it in bite-sized pieces intermixed between pictures of cats and celebrities, or cats with celebrities.
What about celebrity cats reporting on the news?
I would watch that show, yes. No, wait, that's not the question. Yeah, so I mean, the fact that BuzzFeed has a full-time editor and a full-time reporter that are accredited members of the National Press Gallery in Ottawa, that part is kind of baffling.
Yeah, and one of the things, like, I guess one of the qualifications I found a little weird was that has to be like your primary source of income, or whatever it was worded, or your primary occupation, which to me, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are journalists that are not making a whole lot of money that need to do something else, and that's their primary occupation because that's what pays the bills. But I guess you have to put out some qualifications. So,
and you know what? I think at the federal level, I don't disagree that it should be professional full-time journalists bringing you that sort of information.
Yeah, I'm not against it.
There are pros and cons, and I mean, part of it is
a measuring stick of some sort, and they've put one out there.
Right. So part of the problem with this is you end up with people that are effectively the media elite at that point, whose job it is to make the news, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't get new blood in because you have the 50 old guys that fit in the room, and they're the 50 old white guys that bring you their brand of the news. Right? But then they also have managed to get people like BuzzFeed in there, so clearly it can be done.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the time it's, who you know or who you...
Yeah. Yeah.
Trying to save you some editing.
I appreciate that. I would like to know what the rules are, because I looked up the press gallery for Alberta, and this is not my forte. It was hard to figure out what it is to be accredited press at the federal level. It is nigh impossible to figure out what it means to be accredited press at the provincial level, and every province seems to be different, but none of them have like an obvious 4-point checklist.
You think that they would, you would just go hey man, so Alberta,
what have you done for yours? I don't know. What about you, Saskatchewan? And they would just copy each other, right? Like that seems like the government thing to do to just make the workload easier.
Well, and that's kind of why I went to the federal, because the federal one is, well, it is not entirely clear. It is at least published.
Yeah.
And it was marginally easy to locate. And it was not difficult to interpret, because I managed to find the passage, because it's all just like paragraph after paragraph of like dry text. And eventually I found a paragraph that actually meant something, and I'm like, cool, this is what I need for show notes. So somewhere out there, maybe there's the thing for Alberta, but I couldn't find it, and I gave up after an hour because I have other things to do with my time.
Well, probably because it's just like in some obscure written document somewhere, not posted online, because online isn't media.
Well, and that's the thing. Online. Okay. No, let's not talk about alternative media yet. Let's talk about what actual journalists are. Because I wasn't sure what a journalist is, because I was trying to figure out this whole, like, how do you become an accredited journalist? And then I was like, wait a minute. How do you become a journalist?
Yeah.
That's probably the first question. The accredited thing's like a step on top of that.
Yeah.
So I actually found there's a thing that's called the Canadian Association of Journalists. And they have something like 1,500 members, and they're the, like, leading journalist association in Canada. And they have an ethics guideline, and I'll put it in the show notes. But the basics of it are, in order to be a journalist, you must do the following. You must report accurately. You must report fairly. There is a right to privacy. You must be independent. So this means people can't be paying you to write things that are for or against them or their competitors, right? So you can advertise, but you can't also like talk about the thing you're advertising for, because it goes on to another point, which is conflict of interest and transparency. So if you're going to be paid to do advertising, you have to be clear that that advertising is being paid for, and it's not like an endorsement from you or your organization, right? There's also a thing about diversity, accountability, and then they have a whole section on digital media, right? So they have a whole, like, it's a big long book of guidelines on like how to be a journalist, and the basics are report the facts fairly, and like protect your sources, and don't be a douchebag. Like that's the gist of it, right?
Yeah, if someone's putting money in your pocket, be upfront about it.
Yep. Which I think are all fair and reasonable expectations to have about how journalism ought to work, right? Like,
yeah.
I want to know if the guy talking about like the Heinz tomato plant shutdown in Leamington, well, the next page they run a Heinz ad, like, is he getting remuneration for that ad? Like, how does that work? Or if there's a French's ad,
yeah, there's some kind of
like, is like French's is an obvious competitor in the ketchup market. Is it in their interest that this guy is writing the story? So like, let's separate the advertising and the news, and like, let's be obvious about how the remuneration works. Let's be transparent about that. And this all seems to me, as an outside observer, someone who doesn't have a background in journalism, someone that doesn't do the news.
If only politicians had to be upfront about where their money came from.
Well, they should have an association with an ethics guideline book that you can't read because it's 50 pages, and it makes me very sad because it's very dry.
Or just like NASCAR, they've got to wear those suits with everyone's logo on it. That'd be easier.
Okay, divergence. Could we make that a rule? Could we start a petition on the government website that if you're sponsored by a certain company, you have to like wear the NASCAR suit, so that like you have like the Nabisco sticker on one side and like the Shell gas on the other side?
I'm in. I think that'd be a great thing. Or at least like on the podium in front of you. Like if you don't want to stitch it onto your like Armani suit or whatever you're buying with government money, like just the podium should have the logos of it, like somewhere visibly behind you, around you.
No, forget the Armani suits. They get two options. You either get the flame retardant NASCAR suit, or like you dress like a biker and you have the vest with all the patches of all the rallies you've ever been to, but it's just the sponsors instead.
Well, I guess you could put like NDP rally of '87 or something, like on it too. Like I'd be okay with that. Because some people do change political leaning, so I would like to know where they stood 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a fair and reasonable request. Our politicians should be upfront and incredibly obvious about what they've supported and what is supporting them.
Yep.
And while we're at it, let's make the same rule true for anybody who wants to consider themselves a professional journalist. So the CBC needs to start running stories saying the CBC gets like $50 million every year to run their operations, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to stay in business.
Yeah.
And I realize that like 4 of our listeners just dropped because they think my tinfoil's on too tight. Go and look up for yourself how much money the government gives the CBC. Then go and look up how much the CBC runs pro-liberal stories when they were the ones promising to increase funding to the CBC. I'm not saying correlation is causation. I'm just saying go look it up and make a determination for yourself. Because it appears to me as an outside observer that the CBC ran a bunch of pro-liberal stories when the CBC found out that the Liberals wanted to give them more money, and now they're not being critical of the sitting government. Take it for what it is.
Stories about the Liberal government, that money should have gone to pay for better TV shows, because the majority of the TV shows on the CBC are crap. Absolute crap.
So let's talk about our beloved state-funded, state-sponsored broadcaster. Because if we were, I don't know, a basic dictatorship that a certain prime minister admired greatly, China, just not saying anything, just looking at China. If that were the Daily News, whatever the name of the state newspaper is in China, everyone realizes that it's the Communist Party's mouthpiece, right? Like all Western observers understand how state-run media works in China. Like they don't run stories that have not been government approved, right?
There is nothing wrong with your government-mandated news stories. Everything is normal. Just obey.
Just obey. Nothing to see here. Move along. Move along. Yeah. If this was a country that was run by an obvious despot like China or North Korea or any other communist, we'll call them communist, run government with a state-sponsored broadcaster, everyone would look at it and see it for what it is. This is the mouthpiece of the sitting political party, right? But we don't seem to see that in Canada for some reason, despite the fact that the CBC runs through a press secretary for the sitting government, and they're close with the sitting government because the Liberals gave them a bunch of money to continue to run. If you take away the funding the CBC gets from taxpayers, the CBC wouldn't be able to operate. The CBC also went out to run a media campaign against competitors like Sun News when it was a news station, and Sun News was barred from receiving any taxpayer funding and was on its own to find a carrier. And when the cable and satellite companies wouldn't run Sun News on the basic channels because CRTC would not mandate that companies like Rogers, Bell, and Shaw must carry Sun News, it was in a package where you had to spend several $100 more a month to be able to get the news station. Now that the Sun TV network has gone out of business, we have a la carte pricing, and companies like Bell, Shaw, and Rogers are forced to provide customers individual access to channels based on what they want. No more forced packages, right? If they did with the CBC would go out of business.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against having a government-funded channel. However, I mean, you really need to have a outside person that filters everything to make sure there is as little bias as possible. Like, I mean,
it's almost like it should be there is a group of people that are required to report the news fairly and without conflict of interest. And where there is, they should be transparent. It's almost like it's in guidelines for the Canadian Association of Journalists.
Almost. But
Almost,
clearly
like,
it's not spelled out clearly enough.
Well, I'd like to find out who's on their membership roster and see how many people at the CBC that are like reporters are members of the Canadian Association of Journalists, so I can forward them the PDF file with like, this is the thing that says how to do your job. Could you please do your job?
Well, maybe they've got like one guy in the mailroom that's on that list. That's how they get away with it. Like, well, someone who works here is on the list, so we're covered, guys. We're covered.
I don't want to have like government regulation or anything like that that says if you're going to be a broadcaster, if you're going to be a media outlet, if you're going to be a news company, news source, that you must be a member of some association, right? Because like that defeats the whole like principle of free association.
Well, exactly.
But just if you're going to pretend to be a journalist, just be upfront about it when you're not being a journalist. If you've been bought by somebody, just tell everybody. But I mean, then you'd have companies like CBC that go out of business.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're a journalist, like if you're a respected journalist and you come right out and say, "Hey, someone has paid me to do this," I think people would have a lot more, appreciation for that, and your integrity goes up because you've come out and said, "Hey, this is how it is. I'm being paid to do this, so I'm going to tell you up front. When I don't tell you, it's because I'm not getting paid, and I've given you, the facts or as close to the facts as I can." But yeah, I mean, your integrity is massive then if you have the ability to do that. But I guess everyone's greedy and wants that, money.
I think so. So let's sort of get back into the topic and we'll go off on a little segue. Something that Sheila Gunn Reid, the Rebel Media's Alberta bureau chief, said. I've got a quote from her, and I don't recall exactly where it came from. I put it in the show notes so I wouldn't lose it. She said, "I'm not traditional media. I'm not mainstream media. But my personal politics aside, that doesn't give the government a right to determine whether I'm legitimate or not." And I want to kind of use that as the lead-in for the next part, is the rise of the alternative media, because we've kind of alluded to it. Paper newspapers are dead. Cable news is dying. So you have groups like the Rebel.media or BuzzFeed or Huffington Post that don't have the traditional method of reaching their audience, right? They're not running a twice daily newspaper, or they're not running, it's not Ted Turner's CNN that runs a 24-hour news broadcast, right? Like, these are people with a computer and a camera and an internet connection, which really is not all that different from what we do, right? Like,
yeah, they're just getting paid.
Well, yeah, they have better advertisers than we do. So as soon as we can find an advertiser that wants to pay to listen to us talk,
yeah,
looking at you, Canada, looking at you. Yeah, no, the alternative media thing is huge because you have companies that like BuzzFeed that somehow, as much as it baffles me, are considered, at least in some degree, to be a legitimate form of the news. Like, they're journalists as far as the federal government is concerned.
Well, I mean, with all those funny cat videos, they're, I was going to say readership, but viewership is massive. So, I mean, that gives them, a market to put stuff out to. So, I mean, their audience is, absolutely incredibly massive.
So that's what I mean. Like, anybody that's got a computer with internet access has the ability to tap a billion-person market.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we don't, because we're targeting Canadians that are interested in freedom and liberty and firearms and personal responsibility and sticking it to the man and not conforming because we're not socialists. But
so what you need to start doing then is making some clickbait headlines and tagging funny cat video in the stuff. So when people go to YouTube search or Google search things, that pops up.
All right. Next week will be the funny cat video episode. Then you've settled it.
Perfect.
So let's talk about the rise of alternative media a little bit, because newspapers are basically dead, right? Like, do you read a newspaper? Do you have a newspaper subscription? Does anybody have a newspaper subscription?
One gets delivered to my office because my dad is still a big newspaper guy. So, like, he gets one delivered to the office that he reads. I don't read it. I get all of my news online.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know anybody that's, say, under 50 that still gets a newspaper.
Yeah, although I was actually heard oddly enough, on CBC today, when I was listening to the radio in the car, that there was a news outlet, I believe in the UK, that just established a new newspaper, which is the first one to be founded in over a decade.
That's impressive. I would like to find out more about that and see how it goes for them, because that does not sound like a good business model.
Well, I will put my journalism skills to work and dig that out for you at some point.
Well, I'm because who founds a newspaper? Traditional print media is dead.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work too well, but I guess somebody did. But yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I believe, yeah, print media, at least as far as news is concerned, is dead or very close to.
Well, like newspapers are, yeah, like this guy that opened in the UK. When was the last time you heard of a new newspaper? Like every time it's like one, yeah, like it's fewer and fewer newspapers. And it's fewer and fewer places that are fewer and fewer homes that get home newspaper deliveries. And then we have like fewer magazines and fewer magazine subscriptions. So like even like non-journalistic print media is not popular, and it's becoming less popular. Even looking at cable or satellite access for home consumers is becoming less popular. Like every day, more Canadians stop paying for cable TV access.
Yeah, I don't have cable. I just have the internet.
Yeah, the internet is where it is at. And again, this is a huge thing for people probably under 30. Definitely, it's definitely a younger demographic, but more people that I know are like, hey, I was thinking about getting rid of cable. I'm like, yeah, I haven't had cable for like 8 years. Don't miss it. Don't care. 600 channels, and I watch like 3 TV shows. I don't care.
Yeah. If I really want a show, I can buy it. I mean,
yeah, exactly. That's
its finest, right? Like,
there is so much opportunity for streaming and downloading off of the internet with things like Netflix and Show Me. Like, if you want entertainment, there are so many places on the internet you can go to watch movies or TV shows, or like some guy's funny YouTube videos, or like a cat video or what have you. Like, I don't want to.
With streaming services coming out and being more and more popular, man, some of the stuff on those is phenomenal. Like Netflix has the 100 or something, which, man, I am hooked on. It is an incredible show. Crave TV, which I believe is a Canadian streaming one, has this new show Letterkenny, which is based on life in Listowel, and it is probably the funniest TV show I have seen in a long time. So if you haven't seen that yet, check it out, because it is absolutely hysterical.
Okay, we just picked up Crave TV, so I will watch that. But I mean, like, there are so many more Canadians that are going to that media, and the stuff that Netflix is putting out, or that Crave is putting out, or that you can get on Show Me, like, you're getting all of your traditional like Hollywood media and like big budget TV productions, right? And like things like what Netflix is doing now is what I wish Fox would have done in the last decade with like all of the good TV shows that they canceled.
Yeah.
It's like the production values on shows like Orange is the New Black or Lilyhammer rival what Fox was doing with Firefly 10 years ago.
Yep.
And Netflix puts it online, and it's part of the streaming, and it's paid for, and it's done, and people go nuts for it because of a shift in our culture. Everything needs to be bite-sized, digestible chunks until you want to binge something. And then it needs to be the entire thing has to be available right now because we live in an instant gratification culture, right? I want to bust my phone out while I'm standing in line in the grocery store for 10 minutes so I can watch a cat video. I have a holiday today. I want to sit on the couch and I want to watch the entire like first season of Firefly, right? Like, if you can't deliver that, which the newspaper, traditional print, and television media do not, you lose viewers, which is why satellite companies and cable companies, for that matter, have gone to like the DVRs, like record it now, watch it later, right?
Yeah.
Because it's on demand.
Well, then I think also, I mean, the whole push for environmental this, that, and everything else has also stopped people from going to print media because, oh, then I got to throw this out or recycle it. And yeah, it's not
the whole green wave. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there's no recycling needed on the internet. I mean, it's just the internet.
Yeah, it's there, and there are computers running it, and they run and they do their thing, and you can go on YouTube and you can watch us. You can watch crazy cat videos. You go on Netflix, you get your TV fix for whatever it is that you want to be entertained with. If you want to do news, there are so many people online doing what are essentially opinion pieces, their interpretation of what's going on. And there's enough market penetration that places like the Associated Press, which is what everybody runs for, like the legitimate news anyway, all of the major carriers pick up whatever the AP runs. So why not just go to the AP and get it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak?
Yeah.
I don't think that the traditional media is going to be able to compete with that. And this is where we're going to get into problems with the government being allowed to decide who the media is or isn't. It's like some guy with a YouTube channel. Who is that guy, that the weather guy from like the East Coast? Do you know the guy? I mean, he would do like weather forecasts.
No.
I can't think of the guy's name because he got really popular on YouTube doing weather forecasts, and he got into an argument with like an actual meteorologist. Like, she said he wasn't a real meteorologist, whatever. I want to say the guy's name is Kevin.
Anyone can log into, like, what is it, NOAA, like NOAA, which is like the weather network, and get stuff and like basically make their own predictions.
Yeah.
I mean,
and like, this is a guy that's like doing a thing on the internet and reporting the news and getting millions of YouTube views, and like a professional journalist, like somebody that went to school for meteorology and now does like, is the weather girl on Channel 6, is like butthurt because some guy gets more YouTube views than she does.
yeah, I don't know. If anything, I think that meteorologists are full of crap. I mean, it's the only job where you don't have to be right. I mean, well, that and I guess being an economist.
Yeah, or working for the government. I need to get a sound effect for that.
You know what you need? A giant gong behind you. You could just like...
We would lose so many viewers for that. The dozens...
Just a couple of like AR-500 plates off in the distance, and then you could just use...
Nice. Yeah, I'll get my freedom stick out. I don't know. The alternative media thing kind of bothers me with this, because I don't think the government ought to get to decide.
No, I mean, especially like
as media changes, as we get other because.
And that was like that thing that Trudeau Senior put out there with that little caveat that print media and I can't remember how it was worded, but like whatever other forms
and media of communication.
Yeah, which basically covered everything that could possibly ever be invented in the future, which was brilliant. I mean, right.
And there's no caveats in that for the government getting to decide what is or isn't a legitimate form of communication. Like, it's communication, so therefore it's free for people to use, with some exceptions, which we understand. There are exceptions for that stuff.
I certainly think there are people that like could be considered news media for certain topics, but not others. Right? Like, I mean, you do need to use maybe a little common sense. Like some of those YouTube guys, I definitely think are news. But, maybe a guy that runs a gun channel is not the best person to go and like, I don't know, interview someone about financial expenditures or something, right? Like that's not his background. That's not his demographic, right? He wouldn't be used for that per se, but for other topics, he very well could be the most credible news media person out there.
The whole thing baffles me because I'm concerned when we get to a point that like there are like Twitter reporters, which we've seen, like people like during a national disaster, or I'm sorry, a natural disaster, not a national disaster, although we've had those two.
I believe
during a natural disaster. Oh, I need that. Like, I need a Bazinga sound effect or something for that. I got to work on this. We need to get better at post.
Well, once we get some of that funding in, right?
That's right. Colt Canada, if you're listening, you could pick a sound effect.
Or we can even go, like a little bit lower. Like, I mean, JT, Sean, you guys have got companies. We've pimped your stuff,
Yeah, we'll pimp anything. We'll take anybody's money. I will. Yeah, we are not picky. We'll wear your shirt. So, like, you've seen, like, during natural disasters that people get on Twitter and, like, it is not journalists that are providing the most up-to-date and current information in local events. It's regular people with a phone and an internet connection, right? And they're doing it in 140 characters or less and maybe a picture.
Well, and even like legit media sources are live tweeting, the Gomeshi trial, for example.
Right, and that's like when you're delivering news content in 140 characters, you can't say very much. So you have to say things that matter.
Yeah, either straight, concise facts or, really quick, poignant sound bites.
Well, and that's what it is. Twitter is sound bites for people that read.
Yep.
Like that is what Twitter really is it is sound bites for people that read. But we get that with other online publications, and we get that in cable news now. We get that in like legitimate traditional, I'll call them traditional media outlets, like places like CTV or Global that run a newsroom that have a 6 o'clock news show. And even though they do an hour show, if they can't get their soundbite down to 15 seconds to keep your attention before they switch to the next thing, it doesn't matter because nobody's listening anymore.
Yeah, or like CP24. I mean, that's all they do all day is little quick, 10-second headlines. Like,
yeah, 10-second headlines and a quick interview with somebody, and then it's back to the traffic cams, and then we're looking at the weather again because we can't keep people's attention because our entire country is filled with people with ADHD, and we can't focus for more than 5 seconds before we get bored and bust out our phones and start doing something else.
News on the radio, same thing.
Yeah, there is no outlet, or there are very few outlets that do in-depth analysis of whatever their topic is because they cannot hold the market share because people get bored and they bust out their phone and they start ignoring it. And if they start ignoring it, when the commercials come on, they flip the channel and now they're not getting paid because their advertisers can't make any revenue, right?
Yeah, except for maybe CNN, because it doesn't matter what happens, even the tiniest little thing, they devote an entire day to it and have 1,500 talking heads on there that have to share their opinion. Ugh, drives me nuts.
Well, okay, so I watch CNN predominantly when I travel because that's what's on in America. Like, it does not matter what like hotel you walk into. When you sit down to have breakfast in the morning, there are 6 TVs and they're showing CNN, and that's it. But they do like what that flight that went missing, AM 64. No, that Air Malaysia flight. What was that Air Malaysia flight that went missing?
I don't know. I can't think of the number.
But like, so I was traveling for work when that happened, and that was all that was on CNN every morning for a solid week during breakfast. And they said the same thing Monday for an hour. They said Friday for an hour. The sum total of the hour-long thing was we've lost a plane. We don't know where it's gone, and we can't find it.
Yeah.
And every day it was a different guy that was an expert in something, and a 15-second soundbite, and they would dissect the soundbite, they'd talk about it, and then they go to somebody else for their opinion, and then they go back to the newsroom to do the weather, and then they come back to talking about the missing plane, and now they've got a map that's up for 30 seconds of this is the grid square we're searching today, and there's a Coast Guard cutter looking for it, and whatever. And the whole hour, all they've said is we can't find this bloody plane. We don't know where it's gone.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I was down in Louisiana, or in Louisville for work during the shooting that happened in Ottawa.
Oh, yeah.
And so basically, like, I didn't hear anything until someone says, "Oh, you're from Canada. Have you heard about the shooting in Ottawa?" I'm like, "No." So I mean, the first thing I do is go back to my hotel room, turn on the TV to CNN because that's the only news channel. And I mean, the whole thing wasn't even sort of finished yet. They were still looking for the guy, or I guess he's been shot, but the facts haven't come out yet. They've got 12 talking heads up on the screen talking about Islamic terrorism and this and that and everything else and all kinds of other nonsense, and we don't even know what's happened yet. Like, they just start speculating on something, and then they pull in an expert on whatever topic.
An air quotes expert.
Whatever topic they feel, then they've got to bring in, this guy to give, the black feminist, handicapped, biased view of what's happening, and then the old rich white guy's view of what's happening, and then like someone else's view, like all these obscure viewpoints that don't matter because they don't even have all the facts yet, and they're reporting it like it's the news and factual, but no one knows what's happened. And then the greatest thing ever was coming back and then seeing the Canadian footage in comparison. They came in, they said, we have urgent breaking news. Here's what has happened.
Oh, that was Peter Mansbridge on the CBC, right?
This is what has happened. This is what we have heard, but has not been confirmed. And then they would return you to whatever you were watching. And then when they had something new or something correct, they would break in again and they would give you the correction or the latest update and just give you short bits of the facts and not have 50 people up there talking about something when you don't even know what's going on yet.
Yeah. That's a much better way to report stuff. It's almost like they're actually reporting what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certainly some great things that CNN has come out with, but I just find that a lot of those American news outlets have way too many talking heads that have way too much bias one way or the other. Fox News is horrible.
Yeah, the American outlets are particularly bad for that. They lean especially one way or especially the other way. Our news outlets, I don't know. I don't look at CP24 as being a real Canadian news outlet. They're like, what's going on in Toronto right now? Let's talk about Fashion Week or TIFF, or let's have something on breakfast television, and here's what the situation is on the 409 this morning. You're 16 minutes delayed, and it doesn't matter where you're going.
Yeah, but they do give you quick little headlines.
They do, yeah.
But you'd have to go, oh, I'm interested in that, and then go elsewhere to get the actual story.
Yeah, to get more information, which is probably for the best anyway, that people go and get more information from a variety of sources, but this also impinges on people caring enough about what's going on and thinking that it may affect them enough that they're willing to put in the time to go to those additional sources and do the research themselves,
well, that's how I get
it. Well, that's the problem, though, is most people, I find, if you don't feed it to them in bite-sized chunks, they're not going to go and find a whole steak and eat it themselves. They're going to have their little bite-sized chunks. They're going to move on, right? They're looking for the Twitter-fied version of the thing that they care about. Because if they got to put in more than 5 minutes effort into something, it's not worth it and they don't care.
Yeah.
So for the dozens of listeners of our podcast, we'd like to thank you for sticking with us for 90 to 120 minutes every week and listen to our incoherent babblings about what's wrong with everything ever.
That's fair. Yes, thank you. And cheers to all of you.
Yeah, cheers. How are you doing with those White Russians? I guess, is that politically correct? Can we call them White Russians? Shouldn't we call them Caucasian Europeans?
Well, I guess Russia's all right. As long as we're not including the Ukraine in there and any other territories they may or may not be invading currently. Because Russia still exists. If you called it a white Soviet republic, that might be inappropriate.
Yeah, I could see.
It's not I'm not a coffee guy, so milk and coffee flavored is not my ideal. But every other milk-based alcoholic drink sounded kind of gross. There's paralyzers, which are exactly the same thing, but you add a splash of Coke.
That does not sound like a good time.
Yeah. So yeah, they're not great, but they're doing a job.
Milk and Coke does not sound like a solid combo.
Milk and alcohol already to me sounds like a bad idea, and then you throw Coke in the mix too, and that just sounds like a really bad time.
Yeah, so we'd like to thank everybody for that, particularly Then Victory. If you'd like to make Gavin drink something ridiculous within reason, again, no Bear Grylls stuff, no. Yeah. If you'd like to make Gavin drink something ridiculous within reason, if you'd like to go on the iTunes and leave us a 5-star review, and include in your review what you would like to see Gavin drink on the show, Gavin will probably drink it. If you'd like to leave a 5-star review and ask me to drink something, I will consider it. I might even take it under advisement, exactly. But I can't be bought for so little. If you're Colt Canada and you'd like to give us money, you can tell me what to drink, and I'm Bear Grylls at that point. That's fine.
Yeah, I will take an IUR.
I will do. I'm not even. Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that were in FDE at SHOT Show were pretty sexy, so I will take one of those.
Hear that, community? We can be bought. You can have us dance like your little puppets for the low price of some fancy firearms.
I don't even need to be that fancy. I mean, I'll just dance longer if it is.
All right, the variety of dancing, depending on whether or not we go to the champagne room, depends on the quality of arms to which we are given.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you buy me, like a Norinco, you might get like a quick dance over the clothes. Nothing exciting.
Nothing exciting. Yeah, I like that. We can be bought. If there's anybody listening that wants to advertise, if you want to talk about your stuff, if you want us to pimp your product, we will do it. And for a very, very reasonable price. If you make friends with us, JT, Sean, we're looking at you. We'll pimp your stuff for free.
We already have.
Well, yeah, but we did it once. We're not doing it again. We're not doing it again. You guys got to start paying for that stuff. If there's anybody else that has a product, it doesn't matter what the industry is, we will pimp it if you'd like us to. We will also drink your beer if you make us beer or other alcohol.
Or we will pimp your contrary podcast.
That's true, which reminds me. Tyler couldn't be on this evening. Apparently, he was having lady problems. It's that time of the month. No, he had a date with his lady. That's what it was. I got confused.
That kind of lady problem.
I got confused. You should check Tyler's show out, the International Liberty or Death Podcast. Send Tyler a Facebook message, the International Liberty or Death Podcast, or Tyler Gerard on Facebook. Tell him you want him back on the show. Tell him we miss him. Similarly, if there's anybody else you'd like to hear back on the show, or not for that matter, we'd be happy to have them. We did reach out to some people about marijuana. We do have some upcoming marijuana stuff. It is in the works, but it is not through any of the people that were recommended by our listeners. I'm very disappointed in our listeners. I thought you all, toked a little bit better than that. None of the pot people that I reached out to got back to me. Fortunately, Gavin has some folks that are in the know.
Yep. I'm very much looking forward to that one. I think the person that we've lined up is probably the best person around, at least that I know, to talk about this. Their opinions will be very contrary to ours, which I think is great to add some contrast. But they're incredibly well educated and not your typical 15-year-old pothead.
Yeah, that's good because I emailed those ones and they did not email me back. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss, Gavin, about the media thing and the NDP deciding who's the media?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's no good answer, but yeah, the government should not be the one to decide who is and who isn't media, especially if it's we just don't like you because you don't like our opinion.
Yeah, that's my biggest problem with this is that the Notley NDP is saying that you don't like us, so we're not going to let you play in our sandbox. But it's a taxpayer-funded sandbox, and she's not the queen of it. I mean, she might like to be, but that's not how that works.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am glad to see that did get resolved. The NDP, in particular Alberta NDP fashion, has backpedaled, and Notley admits that they may have made a mistake and they may have acted too quickly without reviewing all of the facts.
Yeah, well, that's just your opinion, man.
The dude abides. Do you need to have a musical interlude, or would you like to talk to the camera without anybody around for a minute?
No, I'm good. I'm not nearly as slick or as handsome. Well, maybe.
Maybe. You got to get, I don't know, either a cardigan or a cowboy hat and a way better mustache.
Yeah, that is a pretty sweet mustache. I am not going to lie.
That's for sure. All right, let's do rapid fire. We'll start closing out the show. We've kept everybody around for over an hour. We might hit 90 minutes today, but I don't think so.
We can start ranting some more and go on some more tangents.
No more tangents. There's enough editing as it is.
Screw BuzzFeed.
Well, actually, while we're on that topic, yeah, screw BuzzFeed. When are you guys... How are you a legitimate news outlet? Turn over your press pass.
I'm not going to lie. I do watch a lot of BuzzFeed for its entertainment value when I'm bored at work. Their Irish People Try Things segment is hilarious. just because I find the people that they get on it to be hysterical. Not that they're journalists; they're just Irish people, so it's funny.
Fair enough. Let's hit the live. Oh, we're not doing that. Okay, let's hit some of the live YouTube feedback because there's some scary things that just popped up. Then
You'll
Victory says,
that one afterwards.
No, we'll bring it up. We're just not going to talk about it because I know a trap when I see it some of the time.
It's a trap.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when I see a trap, I know it. And this one is like General Akbar certified.
Excellent.
Then Victory says, good job finding a loophole with the choice of drinking milk. Then Victory left us a 5-star review on iTunes. She dictated that Gavin must drink milk, which Gavin has done. He also laced it with alcohol. Sweet, delicious alcohol. Swampland Films is live with us again tonight. Swampland says that the CBC is out because they are not accurate or fairly reporting the news. Also that the media should not be funded by the government, which we agree with wholeheartedly.
Well, I mean, I think I have no problem with them being funded by so long as it doesn't influence their opinion.
No, I have a massive problem with that because it is not independent and it is not transparent. You are violating rules of ethical journalism.
But yeah, I mean, that's the problem. As soon as they throw money at it, it becomes incredibly biased because you want to keep getting that money.
Yep. And that's my problem with why I had the CBC being funded by the government, in taxpayer dollars. Obviously, the CBC is going to like the party that keeps giving them more money. It would be dumb of them to bite the hand that feeds. I don't fault them for that.
I'm just curious, though, how much of our tax dollars go to Don Cherry's wardrobe?
Not either way too much or not nearly enough.
Yeah, it's definitely one or the other.
Yeah, either somebody makes a lot of money making that dude some ridiculous suits that he wears once, or like there's some Value Village that keeps getting like $20 donations every week.
I'm pretty sure it's people's grandparents' couches that have been gone out to the trash that someone has come by and cut up and turned into suits.
Repurposed Chesterfields. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which value Americans, Chesterfield, it's Canadian for couch.
It means a sofa, eh? Everybody took a drink break at the same time. I'm going to have to cut out some dead air. Swampland Films, this is the trap topic. Here's a rant, boys. I don't like AR-15s. You're wrong. Fix yourself. Listen to the intro.
Hey, I don't own one, but I still like them. They are probably the greatest firearm ever invented. How's that for controversy?
Well, shit, 9mm or 45? Yeah, I don't know. If I did not have a lovely spouse, I would still sleep with my AR-15s. I mean, all of my AR-15s are definitely locked up all the time. Never mind.
You just actually sleep inside the locker room with them.
That's right. It's a room specifically constructed for storage.
With a bed.
And I just happen to cuddle with my AR-15s. Yeah, we could do a whole show on why you're dumb for not liking the AR-15, but we won't because we like you and we appreciate the listenership.
And I'm pretty sure we already did that like 2 shows ago.
Yeah, and we recently did that. You're wrong. Fix yourself by an AR-15. My Tao, me too. I'm not sure how you say this fella's name. It's like propaganda. I can't even look at their stuff. I believe this is in reference to CBC. I'm sorry, the CBC. Not Canada Post, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Those are different 3-letter entities that sound the same but don't do nearly the same thing. Although it would be pretty cool if I got my mail delivered by the news or my news delivered by the mail. Actually, if I got my news delivered by the mail,
you'd be probably getting a paper delivered.
It'd probably be a newspaper, yeah, so that wouldn't work at all.
Although we may have to do a rant about the post office because, man, they licked balls.
It's
not the fun way.
Yeah, so much editing. Yeah, we could probably do that at some point, or we'll get like a Gavin rant segment on when we're not doing a whole.
They were just supposed to deliver something to me today, and they didn't, and it irritated me to no end.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not surprised.
Freaking cry
multi-cam jackets. Do you think they'll sponsor us for that little throw-in?
Strongly doubt it, but it's worth a try. Okay, last piece of feedback, then we're going to close out the show because it's 10:15. So you've all stuck around with us long enough. We appreciate the literally hundreds, no, dozens, no, tens, single-digit viewership tonight. We do appreciate the dozens of listeners. There are actually dozens of you out there. Remember, tell your friends, share the podcasts. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Canadian Patriot Podcast. Share the episodes, give it to someone you love or someone you don't. It doesn't matter to us. We'll take anything. We're cheap like that. Gavin, best place for people to find you, is that still on the Instagrams?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at urbex_GTA.
All right, check out Gavin and his cool pictures. I do actually really enjoy your Instagram feed. It is usually pretty entertaining.
I try.
It's almost like you're a photographer.
It is almost like I'm a photographer, only I don't get paid, so I could never become a press photographer.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
I've tried, but mostly so I could get into free concerts, which does not work.
Well, keep trying. Maybe someday.
I'm hoping.
My theory with a large part of my life has been never to turn down anything for free because somebody might give you something good by mistake someday.
It's true, and I've done my share of free photos for people, mostly of their kids, though. And nobody ever wants to pay for photos of their kids.
Well, that's because they're gross and terrible.
Yeah, and smelly.
And smelly. As always, my name is Andrew. I'm your host on Canadian Patriot Podcast. You can find all of my work on everydaytactical.com. We're on Instagram and Twitter at edtactical. I lied about feedback. There is one more piece from... You got to help me out with how you say this. Is it my Tao? Me Tao? Gavin's Instagram was good today. I haven't been on Gavin's Instagram today, but I will. Is it stalking? I'll stalk him later on the Instagram.
I think the last one I posted was that one that you did comment on.
Oh, because not enough people go Viking anymore.
Well, as anyone watching us live can tell, I go Viking often.
Really?
That's how I roll. Next time I'm on the show, I'll drink out of my horn. How's that?
Works for me. I mean, there is nothing wrong with Vikings. We like that. Oh, Maytao. Is it 2 syllables for Teo? This is not helping. Maytao. PM me. We'll get it right. I appreciate the listenership. We're glad that you're with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. We did my stuff. We did Gavin's stuff. We should do show stuff.
Yep.
We have a website. For those of you that don't know, you can see everything we post, which is basically just the show notes. CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. I try to have the shows that we are live on Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, almost every Monday. 16 episodes in, I think we missed twice, and we've had alternative dates. I try and have the show out no later than Wednesday morning. The full show notes are available on CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Links to all the articles we talk about, links to all the people that are in the show. You can also see us on Facebook. Follow us on Facebook. We have 175 likes. I would really, really like to beat Tyler and the International Liberty or Death podcast. They've broken 200. I would like to kick Tyler's butt at that and maybe encourage him to get back on our show. The Facebook is facebook.com/Canadian Patriot Podcast. Go ahead, give us a like, share us with your friends. We would appreciate that. Share us with your enemies. We don't care. If you'd like to email the show, feedback at CanadianPatriotPodcast.com, or there's a feedback form on the website, CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback. I don't think I'm leaving anything out. We're live every Monday night at 9. You can follow Gavin on Instagram. You can follow me on several of the social media. We don't do Pinterest or InstaPipe. No, what's that? Periscope? Yeah, we don't do that one.
No.
We're not on Snapchat. We don't. Find us on Facebook. Email the show. We like email. We're old school like that because email is apparently the out-of-date way of communicating now.
I still have a fax somewhere.
Respect. If you'd like to spam Gavin's fax, PM me and I will find you the number. So many photocopies of somebody's butt coming your way.
And that's why we're not on Snapchat.
Why am I
Why am I keeping dick pics?
Gavin, do you have anything else?
I guess we said at the beginning of the show, I'll just finish with that. Petition E-179, I believe it is, about the RCMP. Go out, sign it, because this aggression will not stand, man. You got to get out there and
like that.
Take those guys to task. And
that was a good way to work in a dude. There,
thank
again.
you.
79, the dude abides.
They need to be held responsible for their shenanigans. I mean, I'm all for the police, and the Uber police, if you will, doing their job properly because we need them. But when
I guess
cross that line, not cool at all.
We should have a disclaimer about that. For those that listen, we love our police officers. We love the people that work and train with the police. We appreciate the people that are on the roads risking their lives for your safety. We don't appreciate the bureaucracy and stupidity of your leadership. Groups like the Association of Canadian Chiefs of Police that say that the gun registry is vital to officer safety are lying to you. Criminals don't register their guns. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police saying that a gun registry would somehow make officer safety better. They're lying to you and they're wrong. Tell your union rep. If you're breaking into people's houses for peaceful possession of a plant or a firearm or anything else, you're wrong and fix yourself. For everybody that's on the road, the 99% of you that are out there doing your job, police the 1% that are the bad apples.
Yeah, please get rid of them, and then everyone will love you like we do.
Yeah, we really do appreciate the police. The boys in blue are out there to serve and protect, and that's what they should be doing. If you're not policing your own ranks, let's borrow from the TSA. If you see something, say something. Take it to your union rep. Take it to somebody in your detachment. You shouldn't have bad cops in your own ranks. You know that's bad for you, and it's bad for everybody else. All right, with that, we will remind our listeners, after sticking with us through the show, thank you again. You are the True North, strong and free.